Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. You can rent a property out by the month, by the year, or even by the night. Today, we have an amazing panel of investors who are all in the short-term rental market, but in different places, in different products, in different price ranges. You're going to learn a ton today on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Having trouble finding deals where the numbers make sense? Invest in an asset class that delivers cash flow to you in good times and bad, and where most of that cash flow is tax-free. I'm Dave Zook. Many of you have heard me speak at Real Estate Guys events or heard me on their podcast. My team is a top 5 ATM operator in the country, and right now accredited investors can make cash flow returns well into the double digits and get huge tax deductions. For your free report on this lucrative asset class, email atm@realestateguysradio.com.
Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms, and joining me as usual, our financial strategist and co-host, Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
We've got a great show for you today, mostly because we're not going to do much. We're going to bring you another episode from the 2023 Investor Summit. Last week, you heard from some of the faculty members. We did all kinds of great panels, and we did a panel on the different real estate niches. Once people heard the macroeconomic stuff from many of the faculty members, we invited folks who were specializing in different niches to come up. That was a great topic. And the niche we left out on purpose was short-term rental, because in the room we had several folks that are front and center in this space doing a great job. And so today we're going to present to you a really cool panel on short-term rentals.
Yeah, we talk all the time when you get into real estate investing. First thing you have to figure out is your personal investment philosophy. What do you want? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? What do you enjoy? What are you good at? All that stuff. So you got to get that figured out. And so if you're the type of person that enjoys customers and tenants and nice properties and nice areas, short-term rentals could be a real nice area to get involved in. And so that would be a product niche. And then you look for a market that's going to support what it is you're trying to do. So in this case, a market would be the product niche, short-term rental. Then you have to find a geographic market where that property would be located, and presumably with the right regional amenities that would be an attraction. Obviously, there's resort type places, there are business type places, there are experience-based places that don't have anything to do with the weather, but maybe co-located with another amenity like a Disneyland or a national park. So you have to pick that market. And then you have to think about the demographic you're serving. That's the other subset of market. So market is going to be the product niche, the geography, and the demographic. And you want to think about that demographic in terms of what they really want, what they expect to have, who you're competing with for their attention. And one of the things with short-term rentals that I think is interesting, knowing some people that are in the business, is that it is a repeat business. In other words, you develop a clientele who get to know you, they like you, they fall in love with your property, they tell their friends, they come back again with their family to have the experience again, share the experience with other people. It's very much about experiences. As a residential property landlord, you don't think that much about experience. If I run a commercial property, I don't think that much about the tenant experience. They need a space, who's going to pay for what are the terms? If something needs to be fixed, I fix it and just kind of let that go. But when you're in the hospitality business, it's a very different discussion. And so listening to these people talk about how they approach the business of hospitality in short-term rentals is fascinating. And they're all a little bit different. So I think there's a lot of value in this panel. We're really excited to bring it to you.
A couple of weeks ago, we did a Clues in the News episode, and we talked about the challenges facing short-term rentals in certain markets. We're seeing double-digit decreases in income, but the folks who you're going to hear from today are doing it and doing it at a high level. And when we talk about short-term rentals, that's everything from a true vacation single-family home looking over the ocean all the way to a midterm rental that is someone on a 6-week nursing gig who's going to rent an apartment short-term from a short-term operator, and everything in between. We'll talk tiny homes, we'll talk high-end, low-end, we'll talk all kinds of stuff today, and we've got a special guest moderator next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
The Real Estate Guys are throwing a party and you're invited. Join us at the New Orleans Investment Conference, November 1st through 4th. Now in its 49th year, it's the world's longest-running investment conference and features some of the biggest names in economics and investing, including James Rickards, George Gammon, Danielle DiMartino Booth, Rick Rule, and Peter Schiff. The Real Estate Guys are speaking in multiple sessions, attending lots of others, and we're hosting an invitation-only party one of the evenings for our friends and listeners, including some VIPs for you to mingle with. So make your plans to join the Real Estate Guys at the New Orleans Investment Conference. With all that's going on in the world, no serious investor can afford to miss it. Send an email to neworleans@realestateguysradio.com and we'll get you all the details. That's neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. And we'll see you there. Forbes rated Memphis the best cash flow market in the nation. And our good friend Terry Kerr at Mid-South Homebuyers has been the premier turnkey rental property provider in Memphis for over 13 years. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, Terry has renovated over 750 houses. Real Estate Guys listeners have snapped up hundreds. Discover what these satisfied investors already know. Mid-South's properties are completely renovated with a 1-year warranty and a lifelong rental guarantee. They're affordable, well-managed, and easy to own. Perfect for beginning investors and veterans alike. Get in on the action. Contact Terry and his team via email at midsouth@realestateguysradio.com.
Hi there, this is Danielle DiMartino Booth, author of Fed Up, an insider's take on why the Federal Reserve is bad for America, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Yesterday, we talked about the various niches, some of the niches, and you heard from a bunch of fellow summiteers about what they do and mostly how they approach the market and changes and what's happening, given everything we heard this week and whatever change might be coming down the road. And the asset class that we left out is short-term rentals and hospitality. So this is a wider category than you might think. So a short-term rental is anything that's not a long-term rental, right? A long-term rental is a year-long lease. Commercial property could be 5- and 10-year leases, right? If you think about a residential property that people live there. Now, raise your hand if you have a residential property that's still on a month-to-month tenancy. Month-to-month tenancy. Okay, a few of you. We have some properties that are month-to-month, meaning that at any time, either party can give 30 days notice. But raise your hand if you have a residential property that has a 1-year lease or longer. Okay, more hands. That's typical, and generally, both parties want to have surety. Some tenants can move on a dime's notice, but once you work your way into, bigger and nicer properties, the tenants want to know that they're not going to have to take the kids out of school and things like that. So it's in their best interest to have a longer lease, and you may think it's in your best interest to have a longer lease, and you work that out between you and your property manager. But short-term rentals is a whole new thing. Short-term rental could be a couple of nights, but it also could be a month or corporate housing for 2 months, right? So there's kind of short-term, midterm. There are vacation rentals, but not all short-term rentals are vacation rentals. So it's a fascinating part of hospitality, and the reason we want to do a panel on it is an opportunity for new investors. So we have a bunch of young investors, and one of the neat things is there's a personal use component often, not always, but you can have a personal use component. You can find a great property in a place you want to go visit, and then you can use it for a week a year or 6 months a year, and then rent it out the rest of the time. Or you might just want it as a pure ROI. Now, as I said yesterday, a good friend of ours was at the corporate level of AirBNB for quite a number of years. He's just left, but even though he works on the IT side, he has got a lot of great insider information about that whole organization. Do understand that the terminology AirBNB gets thrown around a lot as though that was the product type, but it would be, like calling a facial tissue a Kleenex. Kleenex is a brand name. AirBNB is a brand name. There's other, Home Away. I mean, we'll let the experts talk about that. But, I'd like to have us talk about short-term rentals, not about Airbnbs. Does everybody understand the distinction? Yeah. And our short-term rentals has a longer capacity. So the cool thing is we got 5 folks here who are all in this space in different locations to different degrees and with different levels of support, teams, and technology. And those are the things you need to make this work. The thing we've learned from our friend who worked at corporate Airbnb is that the majority of short-term rentals fail. I don't mean fail that they get foreclosed upon. I mean that they don't create more income than they cost, which is not necessarily what people are after. Some people want to have a second home and are like, the average person who owns a second home spends 39 days a month there on average. And so for many years, the fractional real estate business has basically had the premise, if you're only going to stay 39 days, why would you pay for 365? And so they sell you a 6-week fractional use. Pretty good. But we're not talking about fractional here, but that's their idea. Short-term is a lot bigger than that in terms of how often and where and what you do and the systems you need. And the people that you're going to meet right now are actually successful at it. So let's welcome up Tim Hubbard, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Hubbard from West Methods. Tim does this at a very high level, okay? So Tim's been doing it a long time. He's got systems. He's got properties all over the place in several different markets. You got to pick a chair first. All right, you can do that. Next, she's got probably has the rentals that are the closest to this building. That's Linda Hayes. Come on up, Linda. You also heard her talk about tiny homes, so you wouldn't be surprised to know that some of her short-term rentals are tiny homes as well. Now let's talk about somebody who's kind of at the high end of the rentals, and that's Anna Kelly. So Anna, we had on our panel the other day. Anna is obviously very entrenched in the multifamily space, but as she's built up a portfolio for her family, they've concentrated on bigger, nicer, grander, if you will, short-term rentals. So that's a really neat part of the marketplace. And then we have another first-time summiteer who's squarely in this business, and that's Celia. Celia's in the short-term rental business. And being a former interrogator, she's really good at screening tenants, so that's good. Now, to moderate this panel, because I have no voice, we're going to bring up a gentleman who moderates a lot of our community calls for SMC and is also squarely in this space. Our moderator for the panel, Adam Penn, ladies and gentlemen.
So I took some notes. So where I think I want to start with this is what market are all of you involved in? Because some of you are in Belize, some of you are in multiple countries. So let's start with you, Tim. What markets are you involved in?
Well, in the U.S., I started in California. That's where I'm from. So when I got started with short-term rentals, people didn't really know what an Airbnb was. It was a long time ago, like 8 years. So things were very different than they are now. And I left California looking for long-term investments. And as I was doing research in other markets, I was staying in short-term rentals in those markets. I'd stayed in short-term rentals for a long time, traveling internationally. And when I realized that the rent I was paying in those markets in the short-term rental versus the long-term rental, like the light bulb went off and it was like, why am I buying these long-term rentals when I could buy this property and make so much more? So anyways, I started looking in affordable markets, the same markets that I was looking for long-term rental investments in. I have branched out since then a little bit, and I have property in Brazil, which I would call strictly vacation rental. And then in Colombia, we're starting on a development, which I would call vacation rental, but also with the ability to actually live in them. And so it's sort of a hybrid.
Awesome. Linda?
Well, my journey is quite different. I was trying to figure out how to get cash flow in Edmonton. Now, we do have West Edmonton Mall, which is the largest shopping mall in North America, and I had a product that was brand new to the market. So I got my builder to build me a single family home with you call them in Texas ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We call them garage suites or garden suites. So I put a 2-bedroom above a garage, and my builder was like, had never done it before. And I said, well, I'm going to be away in December and it's going to be finished then. And I don't want to put tenants, nobody wants to move in December. And I said, you don't have any product. Why don't you furnish it for me? Because you have furniture, you're a builder with show homes. And if it works really well, first of all, you can take pictures, and then I'll buy all the stuff from you. And so in December in Edmonton, I had 5 guests stay through Primarily, that was Airbnb only at that time. And I went, oh, this is great. So I bought the furniture. And then every time I started building these products, I basically worked with a lot of other investors. I built the first garden suite. Now there's 30 in that community, but I'm the only one doing short-term rentals. And the reason I did it was because these suites are 2 bedrooms, 645 square feet. I was showing the product for other investors in my market that live in Calgary, and they're like, "Can you show them?" And I'd show it to a tenant, and they're like, "My furniture's not going to fit in here." So I did furnished rentals. It wasn't really the idea to do short term necessarily, although that works sometimes. So my product in Edmonton, I wouldn't call it a vacation rental. I do get a lot of tourists in the summertime, and in the winter, I get a lot of people that are coming for 2 months. We had the Trans Mountain Pipeline right outside of my neighborhood, so I had corporate people in there for months. There was a big Champion Pet Foods just outside of Edmonton, and I'm in the suburbs, so corporate executives would come and stay in the product. And I have 3, like I could see them right from each other. So a lot of times it'd be like, oh, can I have one for this employee and one for this? So it's kind of a mix of that. And then in Belize, I built 2 tiny homes. I also do have a tiny home in Edmonton, and the 2 here, I still don't have a hotel license, so I can't really say how they do. But so right now I do a lot of home exchange, which I've talked about. So it's kind of a mix of different things. And obviously this would be a vacation and personal use component.
Okay, so my journey is very different from all of theirs. And I'll just say, like, Tim is the expert. He knows what he's doing. So much so that I had Dane take his course, right? So he could learn as much from him as me, because we all do it different ways. And that's what I love about real estate. There's so many ways to do it. But for us, it started out because we spent like 10 years of our lives working 70 or 80 hours a week building our multifamily portfolio at night, on the weekends while we had jobs. And I realized I grew up by the ocean. We did everything around water, and I never took my kids to the beach for like 10 years. So we said, we need to start living and not just grinding, right? So we decided, let's go to the beach, found a place that we fell in love with. And my mind is always going, how can I own something and make it an asset and not a liability, right? So I said, I was shocked at how much it cost to rent a home in Ocean City, Maryland. For our family, it was about $5,000 a week. And we used to just drive for the day, so I never had to rent a beach house. And I thought, that is so expensive. I could probably make $5,000 a year if I owned one. And so I just decided to do the numbers, and I knew my numbers to the penny, and I could only afford up to the max jumbo loan so that I could get a 30-year fixed second home mortgage on the property. And I met with a realtor, went up and down Ocean City 3 different full days over 6 months, and I said, when you find a foreclosure or short sale, this is my dollar amount, call me. And he called me, and we bought it. And the first one I bought, I was so scared, because I thought, what if we have a recession? It was about 7 years ago. And what happens to rents when there's a recession? And is the value going to tank? Because it had tanked from its original purchase price in 2007 by quite a bit. So it was a leap of faith, and I learned a lot on that property. And since then, I sold a lot of multifamily properties because I felt like we were near the top of a market, and I wanted something to exchange into, but I wasn't finding multifamily that necessarily were my profile, and we love to travel. So I said, why don't we look at places where we love to travel, where we go every year anyway. So we drive from Pennsylvania to Texas every single year to see my family. It's a 2 full day drive, and it's a lot with 4 kids and a dog. And I'm like, let's make this fun and not do it in 2 days, and maybe do it in a week or 2 weeks. So we thought, what's kind of halfway to Texas? And it was Florida. Sent my son to school in Pensacola. So we fell in love with Pensacola, the emerald water and the white sand, some of the most beautiful beaches really in the country. And I said, let's find one where we can go visit Dane. And I found a little property. I looked at all the ocean fronts, and it was a motivated seller. And I bought an oceanfront $1 million townhouse. It did about $100,000 a year, and it was very dated. It needed a lot of work. And I thought, if it's going to make this much money already, when we fix it up, it'll be really nice, and we can live there in 6 years when my youngest is out of high school. So we bought it really for lifestyle. But what I did is I looked at a report called rented.com, and they put out an annual report of the most profitable places to own short-term rentals in the country. And Navarre and Pensacola, Florida were in the top 3 for like 3 years in a row, and so is Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Now, every year that we drive to Florida, we stop in Tennessee for a hotel. And I had never been to Pigeon Forge, but I knew Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg had the Smoky Mountains and had Dollywood, which are the most traveled amusement parks and national park in the country. And so that kind of hit our checklist that we can stop there, we can spend a week there every year. So we bought in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We also bought a place in Pennsylvania that's a beautiful mountain with a lake. And so our goal was every single year, we spend a week at all 5 of our vacation rentals, our luxury vacation rentals. And then the rest of the year, we rent it out. And I use second home mortgages for the most part, as long as you can qualify them for them. And then beyond that went to, Fannie Mae backed investor loans that are 30-year fixed. So the thing I love about the high end is I can buy them with 10% down instead of 20 or 25% down, and I can get a 30-year fixed mortgage. And all of my first 2 big ones, $1 million homes in Florida and in Ocean City, my rates are 2.3 and 2.6 for 30 years, right? So I knew even if values go down a little bit, which they will over time and come up and down, I'm beating inflation and making money just on the spread between the interest rate and inflation. So we have those 5 vacation rentals. And then I also own about 300 units in the Hershey, Pennsylvania market. And so we have a lot of doctors. We have a cancer center. We have a research center. We have Hershey Park. And I'm like, we get requests all the time for traveling nurses or midterm furnished. So we have 6 apartments that are short-term rentals that we also put on Furnished Finder as midterm rentals, and we've rented to doctors and nurses. And with those 6 in our apartment complex, where now our rents are much higher, but when we started, where our rents might have been $1,200 a month as a long term, we were consistently bringing in $3,600 a month for the short term. And because we already have property managers on site, we just have our property managers check the properties, and we have somebody in our back office. We pay them 5%, and they handle all of the communications with our guests. So it's a nice addition, an additional income that model that we have in our apartments as well.
And I think you brought up a good point there that there's short-term rentals and midterm rentals, right? So you can do this month-to-month lease furnished and get those higher rents without having to be on a nightly basis. So just to make that distinction.
We are in the Gulf of Florida. We actually have a house right next to each other in Perdido Key, Florida. And then we've got one in the Florida Keys. And the Florida Keys is beautiful because it's a 12-month market, where you'll have the panhandle of Florida. It gets cold in the winter. And unless you're from Minnesota or Canada, you don't really want to be in the ocean in the middle of December. So we found buying in the 12-month markets has been beautiful. That would be the equivalent of buying here in Belize, right? It's always warm, weather's always great, hurricanes every now and then. But we've got one under construction, in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. And that one is the last swath of land in Punta Cana that's going to be built on. So we found that there was great value in having something that no one else is going to be able to build any further.
Awesome. So you've heard a lot of different markets here, and you can have a killer market, but if you have a team that can't execute in that market, then you're not going to do so well. So I'm sure a lot of you have had experience working with team members that maybe don't perform to where you want. What type of team do you guys have in place? And since I know Tim over here has probably the most robust team, let's start with you, Celia.
Sure, I probably have the least robust team. I don't know what Linda's got going on, but for us, the most important component is having a great handyman that's on call for you all the time, and having a cleaner who you can rely on, someone who's going to receive packages for you. You can send them your paper towels and your trash bags, and you know that they're going to make it there. You've got to have a standby cleaner as well if it's not a company, someone who can come in. But I will say the most important component of having your handyman and your cleaning team is to ensure that you take good care of them. I hear people fighting over, oh, well, my cleaner wants to charge me $300 and I just want to pay $275. Give me a break. Pay them the extra money. And for us, we incentivize every five-star reviews we get, or every time they mention cleaning, we pay her $100 extra. And she loves us for it. The other day, I'll tell you a quick story. The other day we had an issue where I had an overnight booking. It came in overnight. We were traveling. I didn't see it. And this is the one property where I have to manually tell her. So she was not going to be there that day because it wasn't supposed to be a turn. I called her and said, oh my gosh, we had an overnight booking. And she said, I'm in Santa Rosa. I'm in Santa Rosa. I'm over an hour away. I can't get there. And now I'm scrambling because the backup lady was out of town. She drove an hour out of her way from Santa Rosa to come clean our place, to drive back to Santa Rosa, and I sent her a $200 bonus. Does that really hurt my pocket that much? No, but it makes a really big difference. So if you're in the short-term rental space, you've got to take care of your people. Pay them well. Christmas time, send them a bonus. Mother's Day, I send her flowers. For her birthday, I send her money on Venmo. It's the little things that keeps your team working for you. And when you have a mistake or a blip on the calendar, they're going to be there for you.
Well, I think you made a really good point there, because you have these stays that, especially if you're in a more luxury spot, if you're not clean, you could be losing thousands and thousands of dollars because you tried to save 20. Anna?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. It's really about having the right teams on the ground. And, for us, the 6 units that we have in our apartment buildings, we use our property managers, and then we have 3 different cleaners that we can call. One is our primary, but they get busy, and there's times that they're booked and they can't service us because they're servicing more than just us, right? They're not in-house. So we have backup cleaners, and my property manager is amazing, like you said. I mean, she's been with us for years, and she jumped over. I had an urgent issue, and she ran over there for me. And so I had her hair done at her favorite hair salon. And, we do things like that just to show, like, we know you're working hard and you're there for us. And the key, especially with me with my high-end vacation rentals, I tried to self-manage for a while, a few of them. And what I found is when someone's paying me $6,000 a week to stay in my place, it has to be perfect. If the AC's out, they want someone there in 30 minutes. And I've had 2 other luxury rentals there as well that we've now sold, but we had the first one and we had a water tank that went out. I could not get anybody to come to me because it's summer in Ocean City, Maryland, and all of them were way booked out. So I was just one little piece in a checkerboard, and I had no priority with these HVAC guys. And so I realized that I just couldn't do it and provide the level of service that they weren't going to expect, to be moved somewhere else or move out because they didn't have AC for an hour, right? They're not as patient as we are when things like that happen because they're paying, they just think you can snap your fingers and get it done. So I've chosen on 3 of my 5 high-end properties, I don't self-manage them. I found the very best property managers on those beach islands who have the connections, who they can get somebody to jump for them, whether it's cleaning or HVAC or roof repair or electricity. And honestly, when I look at it on a tax-adjusted basis, what I pay for property management, you couldn't pay me to pay other people on my staff or me to, for the value of my time to try to save, 10% or 12% after, the tax discount for it. So I talk to realtors in the market that I'm moving in, and I say, who is your very best property management company? Who do people come back to over and over? Who are your best handyman cleaning companies? And I hire the best, and I might pay a little bit more, but I need that best quality so that I have the best experiences. And we have mostly 5-star. We do self-manage 2, one in Perdido Key because we bought it to help Dane to learn. So he's there in Pensacola, so he's learning to help manage that because he's really more interested in vacation rentals than other things. But it has been a challenge. And just while we were here, he and I are both here, and my key lock didn't work. So I had a guest that was trying to get me while I was out snorkeling. And she was freaking out because her parents were 90 years old in the car. They had already checked in, but they left and the lock didn't work. The battery died on my lock. So I called my handyman. They went right over there and got her in. But those kind of things happen when you self-manage. And so, it's not my favorite model, but, where Tim does short-term rentals as a business, I do it as a business and profit, but I haven't built the structure in the teams. I've just been happy with working with third-party managers because it frees up my time, to do it that way.
So mine, I self-manage all of mine, but I use automation to make it better. So I have many different softwares, which sometimes is a frustrating part, but all my guest communication other than questions are directly answered. My lock systems are typically great. AirBNB sends individual lock codes to every guest when they check in, so I don't have to think about it. But having said that, someone books on VRBO, that doesn't happen. So I still have to go in, look at my calendar, see, oh shoot, I need to check this one in. And the other problem, I just had a lock issue the other day. So someone was contacting me when I was here, it wasn't working. And it's because the cleaner changed the batteries and somehow the connection stopped working. I couldn't get get to that guest. So that guest canceled, and now that's a huge issue. The other thing I started doing, and we just did that in Edmonton last week, was we're like, okay, this isn't going to work long term, because even if we call a property manager, do you think your property manager is going to be there within 20 minutes? Probably not in most markets. So what I've actually done is installed a lockbox on every property as a backup that has a set code. So if a guest does message, I can have, and the software I use actually has AI where it'll use to detect questions. So if someone says I can't check in, the lock doesn't work, well, all my Yale locks have a key. Now that key is in a lockbox on the property. The guests won't see it. I don't want it there that they get confused, but it's on the fence right across. That guest can get a message automatically, which this has just started. So, but that's the idea, would be that they could all of a sudden go get a key to get in. Because if they can't get in, especially in Edmonton in the winter time, or I had a guest that just booked this morning saying we're getting in between 11 and midnight. So having said that, because of the software I use, the cleaners get notifications every time a suite is booked, and they have access to the calendar, so my cleaner is responsible for managing that side, and that actually works really well. Having said that, my last cleaner, who had a company, all of a sudden, one day, he messages me on Thursday. He's been cleaning for me for over a year, has a whole company of cleaners, worked really well, and then all of a sudden says, hey, we're not doing cleaning anymore. We want to do property management, and we're going to charge you this. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. So he was I felt like it was blackmail. So the next day I'm like, no, like I pay for all this software for automation. He doesn't have all that stuff. I'm like, I'm not using him and paying him when I already have all this infrastructure. He wouldn't even clean the next day. So some of these companies that are large don't work really well. So I instead hired a lady who has some friends that also clean. And so it's not really a business, but she does go into the calendar. And so far, I haven't had any issues. My biggest issue is supplies. So for supplies, I have a big checklist that every cleaner gets. I have a supply cabinet in one property in one neighborhood where a lot of my short-term rentals are. And then I have one property, I built a new house and I lived in Belize. And I'm like, I have a tiny home and a house on short-term rental. I can't get the cleaner to drive 15 minutes to get supplies. So now I have 2 supply cabinets. So I get Amazon Subscribe and Save. That automates your supply inventory. You get a discount if stuff comes every month. But I still need the cleaner to work with me to say what's missing in the 2 cabinets. And that's still a work in process, because cleaners don't generally like to do this. And am I going to hire a supply inventory manager? So that's one of the biggest challenges I have. My new model is kind of moving more into, let's see if we can get more midterm rentals instead, so that then I put a message, if you're a long-term guest, you don't get supplies other than the initial. And that saves obviously a lot of administration. And most guests don't expect it if they're staying for a month or 2 months. But even though they're long-term, I still get those guests through Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. So that's the biggest challenge I have.
A lot of good points there.
Do you want to talk kind of high level about all the different pieces of management you have? Because you have a pretty large scale system and you also manage for other people.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing here is that I'm sure you've all noticed, but it's very crucial that we're managing our properties perfectly, especially now because a lot of markets are much more oversupplied than they were, and it's really going to come down to management. You can have 2 short-term rentals, 2 luxury vacation rentals right next to each other, and one of them can be making twice as much money as the other one. That's just the reality. And so at the base of all that is the team. And so it's really important to take care of your team. I think one of the other challenges in a vacation rental market is that a lot of the workforce, housekeepers, have sort of gotten pushed out of those vacation rental markets because it's really expensive to be there. So that can be a challenge too. But taking care of your team is really, really important. The very first housekeeper I ever hired still works with us today, and she actually helps manage a bunch of our other housekeepers. So that's really cool.
One component of taking care of your housekeepers is sometimes you have a turn the next day. We have cleaners that will stay in our units, right? They live in Mobile and we're in Gulf Shores, or they live far and we have our other properties. So allowing your housekeeper to stay in the unit, you're going to get a cleaner house, they're going to see what the problems are, and they'll have better eyes on there for you, and they'll appreciate you that they didn't have to spend 2 hours commuting back and forth just for your property.
We're talking short-term rentals today with a panel recorded live in Belize. More when we come back. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
If you love real estate and have always wanted to own your own business, listen up. The Real Estate Guys and their panel of experts want to teach you how to go full-time fast in the real estate syndication business. These next few years may go down in history as one of the best times ever to acquire investment real estate. There are deals everywhere if you know where to look and how to assemble the resources. The Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar will show you how to make big money doing big deals from a team of experts that have syndicated projects totaling more than $1 billion. Don't wait for someone to give you a raise or create a job for you. Attend the Secrets of Successful Syndication and learn how to build a team, raise capital, find deals, and make full-time money in 6 months or less. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events. All the big players use syndication as a way to diversify risk, optimize profits, and earn big money. You can too. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events.
Hi, this is Mark Skousen, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio show. Thanks for tuning into the program. Make plans to join the Real Estate Guys in beautiful New Orleans, Louisiana for the 49th Annual New Orleans Investment Conference. It's a great time, awesome speakers, and the infamous Real Estate Guys party just for our listeners and friends. Get all the details by sending an email to neworleans@realestateguysradio.com. We're talking about short-term rentals with an awesome panel recorded at our 2023 Investor Summit on Sand. Before we get back to the panel, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia. That's your chance to win a prize by knowing today's Real Estate Trivia question. Just a minute, I'll ask you a question that has to do with short-term rentals. As soon as you hear the question and think you know the answer, give us your best guess by sending an email to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address. Because if you're the winner, we're going to send you an awesome book called Resilience, Turning Your Setback into a Comeback. Panelist Tim Hubbard has a chapter in that book. That can be yours if you know today's Real Estate Trivia question. Last week was our first show from the Investors Summit with Ken McElroy, George Gammon, Dana Samuelson, and lots more. We asked you this: where in the world will you find the city of Cut and Shoot? Well, it's in eastern Montgomery County, Texas, about 40 miles north of Houston. Named back in 1912, it was considered a town until 2006, when the town council elected for it to become a city. The population was just over 1,000 people in the 2020 census. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. Which country boasts the highest occupancy rate for short-term rentals last year? Yeah, for 2022, which country had the highest occupancy rate of its short-term rentals? If you know, or you want to guess, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, your mailing address, and the answer to the question. First person that gets it right gets Resilience, Turning Your Setback into a Comeback. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're talking short-term rentals today with a panel of awesome investors we recorded at the 21st Annual Investor Summit. As we listen back in, the question was asked about handling challenges and using technology.
Yeah, so there can be a lot of challenges here. I think one of the nice things, especially since when I started versus now, is that we have tons of technology available. And we've talked about a little bit already today. My team, for example, there's two pieces. So we have our virtual team. We have people in Europe, Mexico, Philippines, to handle all the virtual part. And they do a fantastic job, but we use a ton of software to help with every piece of the process, down to housekeeping. So for my personal portfolio, we have some housekeepers that we work with directly, but then we also have some professional housekeeping companies that we work with. But either way we're doing it, we use a software specifically for housekeeping and operations to make sure that we're never missing a step, because if you have a housekeeper that can't show up and they're expected to clean a 6-bedroom vacation rental, there's a lot of little things that they're going to need to know about that property. And if they're just showing up last minute, without a checklist, without a lot of good instruction,
Without having been there before.
It's going to be really challenging. So, yeah, we have an outsourced team for all of our communication, helps with our software, everything from lock automation to, merging multiple calendars from different booking sites down to managing the housekeeping team and operations.
Awesome. So this is definitely a volatile market. You see all the time regulations are changing, and you could be in a market where you have a short-term rental, and then all of a sudden you're not allowed to have that short-term rental a week later when something passes. We've seen markets like Nashville get restrictions put on them where it's hard to get a permit. Same with a lot of areas of California. I want to say Napa has like 8 permits they'll issue. Really good if you have one of those.
Yeah.
Have you been involved in any markets where you've had regulations put on you that have caused problems?
Yeah, definitely. I'm from California. I know we've beaten up a lot on California. I moved away quite a while ago. But
one of the smart ones.
I still have property there. I've sold most of it. And when I was getting started there with short-term rentals, they didn't have any regulations. And so this is what we'll find in a lot of markets still to this day. They don't have regulations. And if you're going into this on just a pure investment basis, that's really risky, right? Because you could start a short-term rental, they can change the laws, and then you can't operate it as a short-term rental anymore. It does bring up the medium-term rental, which most of the time that is not affected by the regulations, and there's some really good opportunity there, but it really depends on the property. So yes, I've been in markets where they change the rules, and if you can't legally do it, then you look for other options. And so that's why I went to other markets. The best thing to do is, if you're looking just as a pure investment, is to find a market that has rules established where you can get a permit. And a lot of my properties would actually function as long-term rentals. I know that's much harder to find today, especially with the way interest rates are, but having some sort of backup plan is really crucial. That said, Napa, for example, if you have a permit in a limited supply area, you could do really, really well, because the reality is people are still discovering short-term rentals that have never stayed in them before. And so if you're in a place where the supply is limited, do pretty well.
So I think you brought up a really good point there, is making sure you have a backup plan, right? It's hard if you have an 8-bedroom beach house to have a backup plan that's going to go as a long-term rental. Maybe you could sell it, do midterm rents and stuff. But when you have, me and Tim both operate maybe a little bit more on the traveling professional side, and so you'll have these smaller units, studios, 2 bedrooms. These make really good long-term rentals, and they normally cash flow as long-term rentals at the same time. Is there anyone else that has some regulation issues that have come up?
Sure. So I have one that I actually just got a letter on that they've allowed short-term
Just
rentals.
throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
This is a good letter. This is a good letter.
This is a good one. They basically just changed the rules, and so we've had it for several years, and so we have no option. We've talked to them, and I'm actually friends with one of the guys there, but it's what they've just established, and so it's actually in one of my apartment complexes, so it's fine. I'm just going to switch it to, I'm going to keep it furnished and make it midterm and just focus on my traveling nurses. So having that backup plan is really important. The other thing that I do, when you mention like it's harder to have a backup plan when it's $1 million home or it's a 6-bedroom house, right? So one of the things that we've done, and I've been really cognizant of, is that I don't go into, like a lot of people that have come into the short-term market, I don't go into a residential neighborhood like in Sarasota and say, I can't afford oceanfront, so let me go into this neighborhood that has an HOA that currently allows them, because it's just 20 minutes to the beach. Because those neighbors are not going to be happy with you that you have people there that are partying, or they've got people, that they don't know. And so they're going to lobby that HOA or that town to stop letting short-term rentals be in those residential neighborhoods. So when I've bought vacation rentals, I've bought only in areas that have 30 to 40 years of track record that need vacationers. Their money relies on it, and they don't have huge hotel lobbies. So I've had 3 properties in Ocean City, Maryland. They're very pro-vacation rentals because they know if they shut it down, their economy would be destroyed. Same thing with Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Same thing with, Pensacola, Florida. And so we make sure that these are friendly to vacationers. They have been for years.
Well established.
And that they're top of mind to vacationers, right? I say if the market goes to crap and people say, I can't afford a vacation, the people that are still going to travel, for me, are the ones that can afford the oceanfront house. And so I want that unique value proposition. And for me, it's been location and it's been view. And if I can get the best property with the best location, the best view, and then provide the best service, I'm always going to have someone that's going to want to buy it from me or someone that's going to want to rent it from me. And so that's worked really well for me. Where I've seen a lot of saturation is people that think they can buy in a residential neighborhood or like the Smoky Mountains. I've got one in the Smoky Mountains. And a lot of my friends and students wanted to buy, the $1 million cabin like 20 minutes up in the mountain with these amazing views. Well, I realized that not everybody can afford, if the market changes, the $1 million cabin to buy it from me if I need to sell it. And because I had issues with my first one that was up in the mountain, when it snows, you can't get cleaners to come up the mountain in the snow, or you can't get a heating guy to come up the mountain in the snow. So I wanted to be really close to all the action where everybody's going to want to be a unique value proposition, and that way I can always sell it if I can't rent it.
So I think we've only got a minute or so left. What's your biggest lesson that you've learned in all this, your biggest mistake that would help anyone here trying to start a short-term rental or already with a business not make that mistake?
I mean, we've pretty much come across everything you could possibly imagine, but
you've made every mistake in the book.
We've made a lot, yeah, but we've figured it all out, and that's the nice thing about it is when you make a mistake, you know what's wrong and you fix it. And so that's one of the things I actually really like about the short-term rental industry is that you get a lot of good feedback and you can improve and perfect your properties. But I think one of the really simple ones that we learned a long time ago and was already mentioned here is that have a backup lockbox or way for your guests to get in, because if your guests can't get into your short-term rental, that is the ultimate fail, and it's just obviously it's not good.
The one thing I would say is don't assume short-term rentals are going to be more profitable. So I could rent as a long-term rental one of my tiny home in Edmonton for $1,600 a month. So some months in the summer I get $2,600. That sounds really good. Make sure you do a proper vacation rental, short-term rental budget, because if you don't, you might be surprised. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm getting $2,000 instead of $18,000. That is not going to be a good decision to do because of all the extra expenses that people don't factor in. So talk to people who have done it, get advice, and figure out everything you have to account for.
Yeah, your expense ratio on short-term rentals is just so much higher.
Right. And you also need to make sure, you want to look at your expenses and you want to assume they're going to be higher. So when you underwrite, you want to be extremely conservative. If you're relying on that income just to be able to afford that property, you need to assume your taxes are going to go up. So if you buy for $1 million and it was taxed on $500, double your taxes before you underwrite. I made the mistake of buying 2 ocean fronts in one area in about a year, and my insurance on my condo just went up 300%. 300%, because on Florida oceanfront, basically a lot of insurers have gone out of business with all of the hurricanes. So one of my 5 that I absolutely love, we've only had it about a year and a half, we just put on the market to sell because it doesn't make sense anymore, because the insurance is going to eat a lot of the profitability, and then if I did want to put it with a property manager, it wouldn't make sense. So we could still enjoy it, we could still rent it, we could find ways to make it profitable, but you've got to really know your numbers, and then you have to watch them every single year. And if you don't, you could have, expense creep. But if you're oceanfront, lakefront, the things that I like, there's a lot of new expenses coming, and a lot of owners are starting to sell because of a lot of new regulations, new reserve requirements after post-condo collapse, and the insurance. So just be really careful about your expenses.
Yep. And another potential mistake is not vetting your guests. It's really essential to vet your guests.
Says the interrogator.
Yes, absolutely. So I ask a series of questions. I typically don't rent to anyone that doesn't have a 5-star review, at least one. If they have no reviews, you have to go in there and ask questions. Who's coming? How old are you? What are your plans? And do it in a friendly way so they feel like you're welcoming them and you want to be able to point them to places that they might like to do. But you've got to ask questions to avoid headache and heartache. You don't want a group of 16, 17, 18, 20-year-olds in your place causing damage because they told you they were someone that they were not, and you failed to ask the right questions.
How about a round of applause for this awesome panel?
And a round of applause for our moderator, Adam Penn. Live from the 2023 Investor Summit, our panel on short-term rentals. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
you've been listening to the Real Estate Guys for a while, then you've heard about the legendary Investor Summit. Simply put, it's the highest level event we do. And the content, faculty, and attendees are amazing. If you're serious about taking your real estate investing to the next level, consider joining us. You'll spend more than a week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals, and you'll have a blast. It all takes place next summer, so to get the details before they're released to the general public, send an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com with the subject Summit 2024. We'll add you to the advance notice list, and you'll be invited to spend a fun-filled week learning and networking with more than 25 class sessions and breakouts, plus small format roundtable discussions, great dinner conversations, and a ton of fun. Send an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com with the subject Summit 2024 and be among the first to get the details to join the Real Estate Guys and an all-star faculty on the 22nd Annual Investor Summit.
Hi, this is Anthony Malcurie from Hotel Impossible, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hey, come join us for our 2-day workshop on aggregating capital and deals. We call it The Secrets of Successful Syndication. If you've Fannie and Freddie'd out, or you've deployed all your own capital and you could do more deals if you had more money, or if you're sitting on a pile of cash you'd like to put into bigger, better deals, then come check out the event. It happens in early October in Dallas, Texas. All the details at realestateguysradio.com under events. Well, my goodness, what a bunch of great boots on the ground intel we got from our panelists today.
Yeah, what I think is interesting is the different approaches. You've got some people that are building a portfolio around a lifestyle and in places they want to visit, and they use it personally and they make it pay for itself when they're not using it. You've got people that are running a diverse number of markets and properties from a distance, and they're not hands-on. Other people that are very hands-on, managing everything themselves. You've got young people that are just getting their investment career started, people that have been very successful in other niches and added this to their repertoire. So there really isn't a template to say, oh, this is who you need to be, or this is how you need to do it. I think the one common thing is, these are all people that take it very seriously, that this is a business. This isn't a hobby. It's not something I'm doing off on the side. It's something that I'm treating as a serious business, and I treat my customers with the care that they deserve. I take care of my properties. I manage my cash flows, my balance sheet, and I really take it seriously. And so for me, I think that in the backdrop of the show a couple of weeks ago, where people are saying, hey, these markets are experiencing a reduce in revenue per available listing. If you're willing to step up and run your business like a business at a high level, you're going to be in the minority of people that probably are going to thrive in any market, good or bad. I know many people got wiped out in 2008. Candidly, I'm one of them. You know, I was a little cavalier about the properties I was managing. I was busy running my mortgage business, and I didn't pay that much attention to my rental properties. I thought it was kind of a mail-in, and it wasn't. And then I looked at a guy like Kenny McElroy, who was paying great attention to his portfolio and what he's doing right now in today's market in terms of slowing down the number of deals, being very careful in his underwriting, tightening up his operations, reinforcing his relationship as a company with his employees, but also with his tenants, so that they have that rapport and that relationship, the retention that you need to have. So many little things that make a difference in building a great business. And so to me, I just heard from a group of people that are all very different, but all succeeding. And the one thing that I see that they have in common is that they take their business very seriously.
If you're interested in learning more about short-term rentals, one of our panelists, Tim Hubbard, does an amazing job of teaching a class on it. He was reluctant to do that because he was just doing his thing. He was in several marketplaces. We looked at his systems and his results. We're like, Tim, you really need to share this. And we kind of prodded him along. And today he does this live event a couple times a year. If you'd like to learn more about that, just send an email to shortterm@realestateguysradio.com, shortterm@realestateguysradio.com. If you thought this was an interesting discussion and you'd like more, well, then definitely plan to join us for the 2024 Investor Summit. You can find out more by sending an email to summit@realestateguysradio.com. Big thanks to our panelists and a special thanks to moderator Adam Penn. Next week on the program, we've got a great show for you. Until then, Go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers. Low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct. Asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys radio show.